Okay, today on the gun bench we're going to be doing a complete disassembly on the FN FNX45 Tactical. This will be the same disassembly for the regular FNX45. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it, and we'll start by doing a field strip. So we'll make sure the gun is empty, flip our takedown lever down, and remove the frame from the slide. This is where you'll go ahead and remove your thread protector if you have it on there. Remove your barrel. Now if you have an optic, depending on how far you go, you might want to remove the optic now. You will have to remove the sights to get the firing pin block all the way out. So I've removed my optic so I can show you that. So on the back of the gun here, one sec, lights. Here we go. There we go. On the back of the gun you have your firing pin, and then you have the firing pin block that cover. So what you're going to want to do is push in on the firing pin block and push the firing pin in. And when you do that, you're going to want to just kind of slide down that plate. It's typical 1911 style, so if you've ever done one of those, it's kind of the same thing. So once you get it down far enough, you should just be able to pull it off. Yours might be stiff, so you might have to take a small punch and just kind of give it a few little taps, and you can remove that plate. Make that our slide bowl. From there, just push the firing pin block in, and you can remove the firing pin. Keep the firing pin block held in, and then you can dump the spring out. And then, if you want to remove the firing pin block, you're going to have to remove the sights. So in order to do that, you're going to do it one way or another. You're either going to use a sight pusher, or you're going to use a brass punch or a plastic punch and a rod and knock them off. Now, do you really need to go that far? I mean, yeah, if you have a few thousand rounds through it and it's gunked up in there, you might take that off. It's going to be completely up to you. I do have this Wheeler Engineering sight pusher, and I'm just going to remove my sights. So I'm going to set my pusher in here. I'm going to set it up where I need them to be. Pull sled back about right there. Should be okay about right there. Now I've got it in there and square. I'm going to tighten these up on the side. And usually I'd recommend wrapping tape around these, but these sights aren't going to take too much to get off. This is actually a really good sight pusher. I've used it on multiple sights. So I'll say that, and something will happen today. So now we'll go ahead and remove these sights. Now you always want to try to track where you're at when you're putting your sights back on. So I'm going to tighten it up to the left and look at my gauge here so I know where they're going to be when I put them back on. So now I'm just going to push them off, make sure that the isn't digging into the slide. It's always something you got to make sure of. And I'm just going to push these sights off. Make sure everything's still okay. We're not digging into the slide. Okay, so now we've removed the sight. I'll set it off to the side, and I'll remove the top half of the pusher. Set it off to the side here. Alright, and we can remove our slide. Set the pusher off to the side real quick. Put those back on at the end of the video. So once you've removed the sights, from there you're going to have a spring. You can just pull that spring out, or you can just dump it out and everything will come out. So there you have your firing pin block and its spring. Next is going to be the extractor. So I hope you'll be able to see what I'm going to do here. So if you see and you look down in there, it's basically just a spring and a plunger that's keeping pressure against the extractor. So what I'm going to do is put a small flathead in between the extractor and that plunger, push it down in there, And then I'm going to pull back, and then I'm going to try to lift that out of there. And a lot of times I can just, I'm doing this the wrong way. Here we go. Kind of just lift it out of there with the screwdriver, if I can get it in the right spot. Whoops, that's what you don't want to do. End up scratching the slide. Come on now. There we go. I was trying to wiggle it forward to get it to come out while you're pushing that back. It's kind of hard. So there's your extractor. And then you're going to have a plunger. And then down in there is a spring. I don't know if you'll be able to. So there's your spring too. So there's those parts. So now the slide is completely stripped, besides the front sight, which of course I'm not going to do because there's no need to. So we'll set this off to the side, and now we'll get to work on the fun stuff, the hard stuff. So now you have the frame. Now what you're going to want to do first is remove the takedown lever. So this takedown lever has kind of two different positions. That the spring, it's going to be hard to see. So there's a spring that it rests against, and when you turn it, it kind of locks into a groove. You're going to kind of put it up halfway here, and then I'm just going to kind of push it out from this side. And I'll get it to that point. I should just be able to pull the takedown lever out. Now you can see that spring I was talking about down in there. I hate using this camera because it shuts off. So there's your spring. We'll get more into that later. Okay, so here's the part where it gets a little wompy. Now, when I did this a few years ago, I did it differently. Now I've got a different tool I'm going to use. So basically, you have your locking block here. And this locking block isn't pinned in. It is basically wedged in between the frame. As you can see, this frame is pretty flexible, really. So ideally, not ideally, but what you need to do is you're going to be spreading the frame apart enough to pull that locking block out. And that can be a little scary. So what I have is, these are snap ring pliers, but these are inverted. They can be both pliers, or they can spread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these in the frame, and I'm going to lightly spread the frame apart until I can pull out this locking block. I didn't get it all the way out on that turn, so I'm going to kind of pull down and open it back up just a little bit more here, just to get that other side out. So now your locking block is out, and it frees up everything else. So that's something you got to be really careful with when you do these. These frames are flexible, and I've done this before. When I did it, I used to have these clamps I found at a rummage sale, and I think it was a doctor, but you know, I put the clamp in there and you turn it and it spreads. And I've also done them with two bolts. You bolt and you turn the bolt and it spreads it apart. But I found these are awesome. So that is how you're going to spread the frame. Like I said, I've done that before, and I've measured each time to see if, made sure that it didn't warp it or bend it out completely and stay that way, and it didn't. So that's the only way I know to get that out, besides actually sticking a screwdriver in there and popping it out. So now what you can do is, before, I should have said this before, you're going to need a very, very, very small hex head key to remove this right hand decocking lever, and I mean really small. So if you're looking to buy one of these, it's going to be a 0.28 Allen key. And if you look in the bottom of the decocking lever, there's a little hole. They've made two different versions of these, but this one's got the hole in the bottom right there, and that has a small Allen screw in it as a set screw. So I'm going to put this down in there, and I'm going to screw that out. Now you might have a different version. I haven't seen many of them. Every one of these I've done has had the this style, but I've heard there's another style with a pin on top that is just like a detent. You push down and then it pops out. So I'm going to unscrew this. It's going to come out about 1/8 of an inch, I'd say, before I can pull that left side off. So hope you guys didn't go through and do the frame and then get to this and realize you don't have that small of an Allen, because that's not something that's going to be in your everyday set. I had to order these. Actually, I had a single one a long time ago, and then I lost it, and so I had to buy that set, which is like $6 on Amazon. So it's from, crap, I can't even think of the name. But so now I've removed that. You see, I'm just going to leave the Allen screw in there. You see how small that is? I think it's microscopic. So we'll put that over there and put this off to the side. And now I can remove this right side just by pulling it out, or left side by pulling it out. So from here, you can, let's see what I did. I'm going to remove this pin. And I'm going to take this pin out with a punch here, and I'm just going to push it through. I think I want to push it through this side. I can't remember now. Yeah, I'm going to push it through that side. Just be careful that you don't lose that spring if it pops out. Because that spring goes back in the slide like this, sits on top of the slide lock, and then this is what feeds on top of the takedown lever. So now I'm going to remove that pin, put it off to the side. Now I can remove the takedown lever, or the slide lock, and now my trigger is free to come out with the Sear cage. So what we're going to do now is just lift up on take the trigger with it. I'm going to take that all out as one piece. Now from here, you can do this if you'd like. I wouldn't recommend it unless you have like tens of thousands of rounds or a lot of rounds for this gun. And I don't even want to do it, but your two rails in the back, they just pop out, which I'll just go ahead and take them out. They just pop out of the frame. But these other two here, as you see, they've got this bar here that's keeping them in place. This bar just sits down in there and it puts pressure on both sides. So in order to get that out, you're going to have to do the same thing with your spreaders, and you're going to spread that apart enough to where you can get this right side out. So I'll do it despite not wanting to. So I'm going to open these up, and I'm going to spread the frame just enough to where I can pull this out and start to raise it up like that. So now that I've got that up, I should be able to take this one now, do the same thing and lift them up like that. Now I should just be able to pull both of those out of there. Those are labeled L and R for left and right, so that's nice. And now your frame is stripped besides the magazine release. So I hope you'll be able to see what I'm doing on the magazine release. Let me make sure my lights are as bright as they can be. Let me try to turn on one more. And now, to do the magazine release, I'm going to see if I need to zoom in here. Yep, you're not going to be able to see down in there. But if you see, the magazine release has a double spring that goes through. Hopefully you can see that down there. And essentially what I'm going to do is lift that out of there. So I'm going to take a pick, probably from the top. Hopefully you'll be able to actually see what I'm doing. I'm going to grab one of those loops of that spring and I'm going to pull them up. Just make sure you don't get into the frame if you're using like a pick or something. I'm going to lift that spring out of there and I'm going to try to... Nah, I'm not going to use those. I'm going to use the forceps and try to grab it. I'm just going to pull that spring out just like that. And now my magazine release will fall out. So that is the completely stripped FNX45 tactical. Besides, we'll do the Sear cage now, which is the hard part. Alright, so first, you can do one of two things. You can remove the trigger bar if you can. You might have to cock it, I believe. Let me see. I can't remember now. And you can kind of just work it out of from underneath the disconnector. Yeah, usually you can pull it out, get it underneath there. Might need to. There we go. So I'll work that out. Alright. So I'm gonna. Alright, so let's get into disassembling the fire control housing or the Sear cage. So we'll go over a few things on what they do real quick. Say if we cock the hammer and you had this lever through here, basically what it'll do is when you rotate it down, and maybe we can just do it real quick without it coming out, but if I can get it through, I'll push this one out probably. So if you can see, this kind of give you an in-depth of how it works. So let's say we decock it, I'm going to keep my hand on the hammer just so it doesn't go flying, but push down on the decocker, it's going to lift up this return spring. It's going to push up this part of the Sear. So it's going to push up right here, which is, if I do it again, you can see that just the Sear lifts up. And what it does is this left lifter here is what catches the half cock notch or the decocking notch on the hammer. So when you push down, it only lifts the Sear up as compared to when you pull the trigger. See if I can actually do it. I doubt it, but yeah, maybe I might be able to get to it from here. But I pulled the trigger. Oh, I can't get in there to do it. Well, basically when I pull the trigger, that this is going to lift up, and this is what lifts the Sear up. So that would lift that out of the way so that the hammer could fall all the way and hit the firing pin. So this would be your safety lever. So let's see if I had this back down again. Where'd it go? Let's get that back in there. I'll show you. This sits in there, so it's not. There we go. So if I flip the safety, it's going to go up, and that's going to block that from the Sear being able to be pushed up now. So it's pretty nice. So now we'll get to disassembling it, and as you see, this selector just slips off there. And same with the other side. So if you flipped it over, this one here just sits like that. So you can just pop it off there. We'll set those off to the side. And now you can remove the returns here. So what you want to do is just, it's pretty easy. You'll just, hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Let me check the camera. You should be able to see here. So I'm just going to kind of lift these up just a little bit to get them past that point. And then I'm just going to lift them up with my fingernail and just out of there. And just make sure that it is under a little bit of spring tension and that you let those out easily and don't let the spring fling them across the room. So we'll do that to the other side. Same thing. We're just going to lift up a little bit. Just lift them off of their knot. So they have just a nub that they sit on both sides. So that's not a pin that goes through there.
Next, we will want to remove the hammer. So the hammer springs, they loop around here, and this is where they rest, right here on these two edges, and they come around and they sit on the hammer. So they are in a downward position. So if I lift up, cock the hammer, as you can see, they're getting tensioned up. And if I push up on the sear, it's going to, the springs are going to want to push it down. So that's how those work. So in order to get that out, you'll want to detension the springs first. So what I'll do is I'll have it like this, and I'll take my screwdriver, my slotted one, and I'm just going to push those off of their ledge that they sit on. So basically just going to put it in here. Keep your finger away from here because it will snap pretty hard. And I'm just going to snap them off their ledge that they sit on. So now the hammer's free and it's not tensioned anymore. When you get it to that point, now you can just take a little screwdriver or something and just push out this hollow pin here. Once you do that, then you can pull out the hammer. Now if you want, you can remove the disconnector from the hammer just by pushing this pin out and removing it. Putting it back in, we're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to put it back in so I don't lose that pin. Just put it right back through there. So the hammer's off to the side. And then next, we'll be able to remove the sear and the lifter. So what you'll want to do is just push out this pin here, keep your fingers over the top, and pay attention to your springs up top. And I'll explain how they go here in a minute. But you should, one of your springs should be blue, but I've messed with this one so much it's taken off the chalk that they put on there. So we'll go ahead and push this pin out. And that's going to have the safety lever with it too. And that's just through there like that. And then now I will remove my punch and I will let my two springs come out with my lifter slash, I can't, you know, they call it lifter, half cock notch that it drops on. The FN is like very secretive about their parts diagrams. So you know, every company names stuff differently besides like your Sear. So they always have this one-off name for everything. So what they actually call it, I'm not sure of. So now that those are removed, we'll get to these springs in a second. These springs are very important, and you have to know which one goes which way. So just make sure you know that. And the only last thing you can do is that this housing does break apart into two pieces. And what you'll do, which you need to get these springs back in the way I do it. So if you just start kind of pulling apart, you'll be able to kind of open up this bottom one here. I'll get my really thin screwdriver. Just get it in between there enough to where you can start separating this, because this isn't a pin. It's just studded on both sides, so you can't punch that out. So I'm going to just put in there, just kind of pry these apart enough to where I can start pulling them out, and that's how they'll come out in two separate pieces. Now I'm going to go ahead and put them back. I really don't want those springs to fall off there because you got to make sure you know which way those go. But I'm just going to put them back just enough to where it holds it together and the springs stay in place. And then I'm just going to, let me see which way I'm looking at it here. This way. Nope, looking at it the wrong way. Here we go. I'm just going to rotate it out like this, because this is the way I'll need it to put the sear and everything back in, at least the way I do it. So hopefully you'll be able to see what I show you on these springs. You're going to have two cold springs like this. One of them goes around the sear just like this. Let me get the other one here and I'll show you how it goes. So you're going to have two springs. This one is coiled starting from the right side. It coils over twice and comes out at the bottom on the left side up. So it's like this. Let me get the camera, make sure you can kind of see the way it sits. Nope, way off camera there. So you can see it doubles back around and it comes out on this left side. That spring is going to be for the lifter. Yours is probably blue for the Sear, and it goes the opposite way. So it coils from the right, or from the left, under, and then it comes out under on the right side. So when you put this back on the Sear, it has to go under, like this. So when you put it, let's see if I can put tension on it here. You're going to push in there. It's going to sit in there like that, and that's going to put downward pressure on it. So what you could accidentally do is get them mixed up and take this spring and put it on there just like that. And see, it's coiled from the left to the right, but the tension is on the top, so it's not putting nearly as much tension on it. Now, it would probably work, to be honest with you. You don't want to do it, though, because what will happen is that this won't rest back down where it needs to be, because not as much tension is being put on it if you put it the wrong way, and your hammer probably wouldn't cock at all times or stay back when you cocked it, which could lead to all kinds of problems. So don't do that. Pay attention to the way you put these springs back in. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with a 3/32 punch, or something close in size. You want it pretty damn close to this size of the hole. And I'm just going to go ahead and stick it through that hole on this left side. So if you can see how it looks here. I'm going to put it through, and this, I'm going to start catching everything. So I'm going to take this lifter here, and I'm going to put it on just like this. You can see where the cup is, where the Sear sits on top of it. And I'm just going to drop it, and I'm going to slide it on. And it's going to sit in this little groove it's got. So now what I'm going to do is take that spring, set this kind of like this, make sure I've got the right one. That coils over and under, and that's not it. It's this one. So this one coils and comes out under and up on the left side. So, of course, these tension down. So they're pushing this is just an example. This pushes down. So it has to get its tension from somewhere. So where does this end rest? It rests right here in this slot. You can't get it down here or here. It has to be in this slot, and that's why I do it the halfway like this, because it's a lot easier than having this all together, trying to keep these both together with a slave even, and trying to wedge them down in there where you get the pin through. It's not as easy. I found this way a lot easier. Last time I'd taken one of these apart, I did it the hard way. So this way is easier. I think it's the best way to do it. So this is the way I do it. So now I'm going to take that spring that coils and comes up on the left side, and I'm going to, hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing. I'm going to put it through and make sure that it goes in that slot here on the left, or on the back, and then I'm going to push it up on top of the lifter here. So I'm going to keep it held together because it will want to pop off. So that is how it should look, coming up from the bottom and up onto this ledge. And the rear of the leg in this slot right here. Now from here, I'm going to take the Sear and do ideally the same thing. I can go ahead and put the spring on the Sear right now. So I'm going to take it, and I'm going to put it on the left side, or the right side, sorry. And it's going to do the same thing. It's going to coil around, and it's going to come up and on top. Not over and on top, but up underneath and on top, and sit down on the Sear. So it's always pushing tension down on it. So when I do that, I can pretty much hold it with my finger like this. And I'm going to Slide it onto the punch. Slide that back end into the little track it's got. Push it on there as far as I can get it. I need to get it. Probably push the spring down to get it all the way through. And that, hopefully I can keep this all together, is how it should look. I'm going to drop this if I try to touch the camera. So this is how it should look, and it probably doesn't look. Both of those springs are coming up from the bottom and sitting on top. So now there is the easy part. Here comes the hard part. So now that this is why I do this in halves. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to back this punch out flush with the sear pretty much. Don't have to be complete, but make sure that sear stays over because that left spring wants to flip underneath there all the time. And what you have to do is, I'm just going to start rotating this back to where it belongs. And once I get it here, where the ejector is up here, I'll be able to hopefully get my finger in here, and I'm going to lift this all up, lift the sear up basically. And I'm going to slide it in there. Just like this. Just kind of slide it through. Pop it at the bottom, get it lined up, push the punch all the way through so it's captured on this side. And now just make sure everything else is lined up right, which these springs down here can get bound up. So just kind of pull those apart and push them through like that. Get your finger caught in there. Now, it looks like I might have to pull this back up. It fell out of its little track here, so I'm just going to flip it up into there. So now it's all put back together. You're still not home free yet because you still got to get that pin through, and that pin is tightly fit, so it's kind of hard. So now that I've got a little better, hopefully it focuses and you can see. I'm not sure how the GoPro's actual screen looks like crap compared to when it gets on the computer, so you can see how that all goes back together. Yeah, 16 minutes in just on the sear cage. Alright, so now we're going to want to put this pin back through. And this can go quick and easy or take 5 minutes. Ideally, you'd be using the pin to punch the punch out, but it never works like that. So what I'm going to do is just start pulling the punch part way back here, and I'm going to put this in with the safety lever in. And now I'm going to just start pushing the pin through. I might even take like a just kind of work the punch and the pin at the same time. It's not through yet, but I think it's through enough I can pull the punch out. Looks like I just need to push down on the sear maybe a little bit here. Last thing I want to do is lose it all, so I'm just going to stick this back through. Push down on the sear here and kind of might have to push down on the little screwdriver and push through. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So now it's all the way through. Both springs kept where they're supposed to be. This here's got tension. Lifter's got tension. Now, you've completed pretty much the hardest part of the gun. Doing it in halves makes it easier. If you try to do it the other way, you're going to struggle. You have to use a slave pin. There's nothing wrong with that way, but this just seems to work better. Trust me. After you do so many of them, you'll realize it. Okay, so now we're ready to put the hammer back in. So the first thing you want to do is, more than likely your springs retension themselves, or they're sitting back on this inside lever, inside spot where they sit. Probably sitting like this. So in here, so just make sure you flip that off of there, so you should be able to move the legs of the springs, the two legs that are inside there. Hopefully you can see them right here, because those sit on the edge of this hammer right here. So what I'm going to do is keep these right here. So when I put this in, I'm not putting tension on them. I'll put the tension on them later. I'll pull these back and put them in their slots. So I'm just going to keep them in there so that when I put this hammer and slide it through, the two legs rest right out here on the hammer. So probably what you'll have to do is go ahead and slide this disconnector in. It's got this nub right here on it, and that nub will go in this slot. So more than likely what you'll do is probably start sliding it through. Just gonna stick the disconnector in that, or that, yeah, in the slot. And then you'll probably have to lift up on the Sear a little bit and then push right here on this lever. Just lift it up enough to get the hammer to go past it, so it should go like this. Let's see, what I did was I did it too far and I let the spring slip out from behind it. So I'm just going to push those up in there. And now, so now the disconnector is in the slot where it belongs. My hole is opened up enough to take my pin and lift up. I'm going to have to work with it a little bit just to get that through. And now you can see where the two legs are. Hopefully, let me check. In there you can see, black out. Maybe from this side. Maybe from right there. You should be able to see that those two legs are sitting on the hammer. And now if I go here and I pull these two arms back, there's a lot of tension there. So that's what's going to put tension on the hammer. So now what I'm going to do is tension the hammer, and I'm going to use a trusty slotted screwdriver. And what I need to do is take it and lift this leg up and put it right there. Just be careful, keep your fingers back, because these snap and they kind of hurt. And then I'll do the same with this one. I'm just going to lift it up. This one's the one that'll get caught because you have to move it over to the right a little bit more. Nope, stabbed myself, but I got it up there. So once I get them up on that where they rest, I'm just going to push on them just to make sure they're on there all the way, because you don't want them sliding off later on. Alright, so now I should be able to cock the hammer, lift up with the Sear, and the hammer should drop. I'm just not going to let it. Yeah, it drops and does what it should. So now we will go ahead and, let's see. Yeah, go ahead and put the selectors back in. So take the two selectors you have. What do I do with that? 1 second here. You're going to take on the left side, you're going to want to grab your reset, and you're going to put the spring on the nub right in here. So what I do is just put the spring, kind of get it on the nub itself, and then make sure that this front edge isn't touching the plastic or below it. And then I'm just going to push up with both fingers until I slide the back end on that nub. And you're going to do the same thing over here. Going to put the spring in the little nub. And just slap it on there like that. Just push down until they're snug and secure. So now what you're going to need to do is, what I recommend is just get a little grease. Since this is a rotating part technically, you can use a little bit of grease, and that's going to help keep those in there while you're moving it around. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this Tetra grease, just kind of put a couple little spots on there. And now I'm going to set this side, so this is the lever that goes on the right, and it just sits in here like that. And that grease is going to help with the friction, but it's also going to keep it from falling out. Because if I just stick it in there, even though this one has some grease in there as it is, it's just probably just going to fall out while we're finishing up working on it. Let's see. So put a little grease on this side too. Put this lever or this selector in like this. See it a little up. It can kind of put it in the wrong spot. Lift up and rotate this one. It's got this notch here that it sits down into, so it can only go in one place. All right, let me put this back up. Okay, now from here, let's see, we're ready to put it back in the gun, get the gun back together. So what I do is go ahead and put the trigger bar on. So just take it like this and slide it underneath the disconnector. You might have to just kind of maybe lift it up a little bit, and you should be able to slide it underneath it and get it in there like this. Make sure everything's working. So it's going to go back in the frame like that. So the first thing you're going to want to do is grab your frame, and then grab your rails. So take your left rail, snap it in there, it just sits in there. Same with your right rail, just pop it in there. Now, at this point, you're going to want to go ahead and put your front rails back in, because you don't want to be in there prying with the snap ring pliers. So just go ahead and snap the right side in. Go ahead and snap the left side in. And now you're going to have the horseshoe that's going to go down in there. So now this horseshoe is going to go in. It's kind of bent here at the bottom. So it's going to go in facing towards you like this. And you can pretty much get it down almost where it needs to be. I like to get in there as far as I can. And then I'll open the frame up. Once again, this is the part nobody likes to do, but I might get a little off camera because I'll have to open these up while I push down on that. So I'm going to take a slotted screwdriver or something. And it'd be better if I had this in a vise, but I'm going to open it up. I'm just going to push those down in there. See if I can get it. I'm in the wrong angle to do this the way I want. And this ain't it either. Let's see, I don't want it to pop out of there like that. Get down in there. Yep. Can't get it sit where it wants to go. As long as I can get it down in there, it'll... Got it down in there enough. I should just be able to push these back. This one up a little bit. Nope, that was not falling in place yet. Just a little bit more forward. There we go. And you should hear them click in place like that. Ideally, let's see if I grab this and put... So now you can proceed putting the rest of it back in there. Now that you've got that down in there, make sure that those clicked in place and it's not there pushing the frame out to the side. Ideally, I would recommend you don't take those out. You don't have to. I just did it to be complete. Now that we've got the front rails in, we're going to go ahead and put the magazine release back in. So now we'll just slide the magazine release in, get it lined up in the middle where it would rest. And then take your spring. The spring is going to go back in like this. And what you're going to want to do is compress the spring. And when we compress it, we're going to slide it right down into here, this track. And once we get it in the track, then we can just push it down. So you only need to compress it for just a few minutes or a few seconds. Oh, come on now, quit being a pain. So get your spring like this. Compress it. Try to get the spring in the middle where you'll fling it like that. So just make sure you got something grippy enough to get it on there. Now I'm going to compress it, and I'm going to slide it down into the frame. So I'm just going to put my forceps over there and just push my finger and push it down in there. And once it sits in there like that, make sure you saw that here. Oh, camera's fell down. Once it sits in there like that, you should just be able to push it the rest of the way down. So just get your magazine release back in the middle. Take a punch or whatever you want to use and just slide it behind that magazine release. Just like that.
It down.
Alright. So we don't need a hammer anymore, so let's go ahead and slap this rail back in. Just like that. And now we can put the Sear block, the trigger, and all that back in. So the first thing you'll do is grab the Sear block, the trigger, and this whole housing. And you're going to want to, let me make sure, let me check the camera and zoom back out here. There we go. So I'm just going to set the trigger down into the housing. And then I'm going to take the Sear block, I'm just going to do the same thing. Just going to push it down in there. You might have to wiggle it around a little bit, basically until you can see the hole in the back lined up. And you can go ahead and take the decocking lever in the middle position, in the resting position, and put it through. You might have to mess with this side just a little bit to there we go, to get it all the way through. Now once you do that, you can go ahead and put this right side lever on. Just go ahead and put it on like that. Grab your 28,000th. I'm going to push down. I always kind of put it in the decocking mode whenever I'm tightening this up so it doesn't hit the frame. And this just goes up in there. It's just a set screw, so it doesn't actually screw into the bar that goes through there, the rod. It just, the plastic is what keeps it in place. And essentially, so it doesn't actually, the bar doesn't have threads. So this just goes up in there in between. You're going to go up in there until you want to make sure that you don't over tighten it. You shouldn't be able to pull that off once you get it there. So now that we've got that in, that's where it should be. Going to, I don't have to do this, I'm just doing it, but now we can put the rest of it back in. So you'll want to grab your slide lock and put that down in there, just like that. And then what you'll do is grab your pin and take your pin. Now this pin is tapered, or it's got a cut here. And you're going to want to slide that through the slide lock. Get your trigger up, up where it needs to. Oh, come on now. Up where it needs to be. Slide the pin through. And get the pin through just enough to where it's through the locking block on that side, but just barely through, because you're going to have to get the slide lock spring back down through there. So what you're going to do is put that spring, and this end rests on the slide lock, and this end goes here, which is the levers for the takedown lever. And now you're going to push down and push your pin through at the same time, which is kind of hard. This part can be a little challenging because you might have to take a few tries. Get you a slotted screwdriver or something that you can push down with. See if we can get it down in there. Just this part's one of the harder parts too, because you just got to get it all lined up, and that little bitty hole while you're trying to push the pin through just isn't the easiest sometimes. Oh, almost had it. Oh, let's see. Flung it. Let's pull it back. Yeah, this part might take you a couple tries. It's alright. I've done this more times than I can count, and I still struggle with it. So let's just get it down in there. Seems like get down in there, man. This thing's being a pain. There we go. Now you should be able to get it on the notch, and sometimes you can't get it through just by pushing it, because the spring will sit over when it gets on that little notch. So what I'll have to do sometimes, I don't like doing it, but I'm just going to hit it very slightly with a hammer, just a punch to I knocked it too much there to get it through, and now I'll be able to slide it up onto the little ring where it goes. And now it's sitting where it should. And now you are ready to put the locking block lever back, or the locking block back in. Once again, the scary part of doing this. But you're almost done. So now that we've got that done, we can go ahead and put the locking block lever in. You said this is another part where you're going to have to spread the frame open. And when you spread the frame open to get this in, you run the risk of this one falling out, or not coming out, and then the frame gets opened wide. You guys just got to make sure you watch that. So I'm going to bring it up close. I really don't want to sit it on that spring, so I'm going to go up right here by the hole. And I'm going to take the locking block. It's going to go back in like this. It's pretty much like a ramp. And I'm going to try to take my forefingers here and open. Let's see, I want to get it down there evenly, so. I tell you, FN uses some slippery metal. It's one of the slipperiest metals I ever ran across. It's just whatever coating they use on it is super slippery, which isn't a bad thing. Plus, I'm sure it's got oil on it. idea is I don't want to put too much pressure on one side, so I'm trying to get it in there even on both sides, not just, yeah, there we go, right there. And now when I do that, you can see it's not completely set, but at least I got it down in there. I'll be able to shift it with a screwdriver or something. Let's see, this one needs to come back just a little bit. There we go. So let me make sure that yep, we're good. Because like I said, this side here sometimes will want to pop out and it'll keep pushing it out, so this will be really loose. And that's what you don't want. So now we are ready to put the takedown lever back in. So what you want to do, usually you can just go through and just push it through, and just kind of slide it through, or rotate it. I'm just going to go ahead and push that spring down while I put the lever through this way. Just kind of push it out of the way past the spring here. There we go. And now I can put it through like that. Now it should kind of have two positions. That's your middle position. That's locked. That's unlocked. Alright, so now your frame is completely back together. I guess I didn't show that earlier. Magazine release works. Now it's time to do the slide. So we're almost done. So the first thing we'll do is put the sights back on and the firing pin block. So grab your firing pin block and your spring, and it's just going to sit back down in here, just like that. Pretty flush. Then get your sights, slide them on, get them started. I'm going to grab my sight tool again. I'm not going to get them perfect right here. I'll adjust them later, but for video we'll get them as close as we can. That's why I like the numbers on the side. I can watch where I was before and kind of have a good understanding where they need to be, but I use the red dot for most of it anyway, so we'll get them pretty much dead on. If you guys want me to do a review on this wheeler, let me know. I like it. I've used it for quite a few sites, and so far it works pretty well. So alright, so we're just going to go ahead and snug these sights back on. Typically I would put this in a vise when I use it. It's got kind of a cutout on the bottom that you could vise it if I was doing really hard sights like XDs or something. So I'm going to look at my numbers here on the side, and I kind of, let's see, it's about 15 and a quarter or so. So that looks, just a little bit more here. That looks about right. We'll fine tune it later. That's the one thing I don't like about this gun. I hate having to remove sights to get parts out. You know, even though it's, you know, that can get pretty gunky in there, so it's kind of unfortunate, but it's the only, what am I doing? It's the only way to get it out. It's the only way to get it out. So, what can you do? Put this back up. This is a, if you're thinking about getting this gauge, you know, I do pusher, pretty good pusher. I do quite a bit of sight work, removing them and back on. So far, it's held up pretty good. It's not an MGW, but you know, it's also a quarter of the price or half the price. So I'm gonna put this back so I don't lose it. All right, so you've got your sights on here. Yeah, those look pretty good. So now we will put the firing pin and spring back in. No, let's go ahead and put the ejector in. So what you'll do is grab your ejector spring, or extractor spring, sorry. Put the extractor back in. Slide that spring in there. I'll use a magnetic punch. And then you're going to get the plunger down in there, which is just gonna drop it down in there, push it in there a little bit, and then now you're gonna do the easier part, which is take the extractor You're going to kind of come in from the inside. Just sit it right there. And then you're going to keep your finger over it. And you're going to push it back. It's going to snap down in place. Just give it a final little push. Make sure it's all in there. Simple. Now to put the firing pin in, you're going to push up on the firing pin block and slide the firing pin in. All the way in right there till it kind of catches. Then you're going to take your rear plate with the longer end on the left side, so it's going to go like this. And I'm going to get this punch here. I'm going to push on the firing pin block, push the firing pin in all the way down. And you might not see this on camera, but I'm just sliding this up over it. So I pushed it in, slid this plate up until I can push it up just like that. And now we can put our barrel and recoil spring back in, and we are done. So that is the complete disassembly of the FNX45 Tactical, or the FNX FMPs, FNX45 in general. I'm pretty close on the 9s and stuff, but I'm not going to say that's... I'm not going to put that in the description or anything, but it's pretty darn close. So let's just go ahead and try it out. I'll put the sight on later for save time here, but I appreciate everybody watching. Always make sure that everything works fine. Your safety works. Decocker works. Single action pull's still pretty good. Double action pull's nice. I know we'll get people saying, don't shove a pencil in a barrel. Yeah, if you can't tell that a whole pencil comes out after you do this, you're an idiot. So you can always, look at that, right in the hole. That's pretty good. So we'll see you next time on the Gun Bench. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more disassembly videos, and let me know what videos you want to see.